Hello everyone, I'm Lo Sing. Today I'll talk about Introduction to Cambodia. Cambodia is an Asian country located in southern portion of the Indochina in peninsular Southeast Asia. It owns 181,035 kilometers squares in area and bordered by Thailand to the northwest, Laos to the northeast, Vietnam to the east and the Gulf of Thailand to the southwest. There were 24 administrative divisions in Cambodia and the capital city is Phnom Penh. The official language in Cambodia is Khmer, so the official documents press conference will be released and launched by using Khmer. Currently, Cambodian population was around 16,710,749 million and it was ranked on the 71 in the world. Buddhism is their official religion. Around 96.4% of the citizens in Cambodia was Buddhism, which mainly influenced by the history of Hinduism. Cambodian government is a constitutional monarchy operated as a parliamentary representative democracy, which means the monarch or the royal family will share the power with a constitutionally organized government. The prime minister will be elected by the people and the prime minister will become the head of the government. At the same time, the king of Cambodia will be the head of the state. There were 4 major economic activities that contribute to Cambodia annual GDP, which are manufacturing industry, which focusing on textile manufacturing, agriculture industry, real estate, and tourism industry. Cambodia gross domestic product per year shows increasing trend since year 2010. The highest GDP year was 2018, where the Cambodian citizens had created 24.57 billion US dollar.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Siti Nur Azmina binti Maigun, metric number 62559. So today I'm going to talk about the industrial relation, employment law, trade union, collective bargaining, and lastly is the right to strike in Cambodia. So next is the industrial relation in Cambodia. Industrial relation exists in every country in the world. Nowadays, industrial relation have become one of the most delicate and complex problems in modern society. The laws that implemented in Cambodia is because of the growth of garment industry and become emerged when foreign work investors start open factories in Cambodia for export. In 1999, Cambodia faced a quota restriction because US has signed a bilateral trade agreement on textile and has effect from 1999 to 2002. This agreement has obligated all the apparel companies in Cambodia to comply with the local labor laws and international labor rights. So now is employment law. Most of the business will apply some sort of employment law. This employment law is formed from both state and federal law, and this law has many different subjects with the common goal that is to protect the workers' right. Employment law also helps to prevent discrimination, promote health and safety, establish a minimum required level for economic support, and prevent work disruption due to dispute between labor and management. So next is trade union. Under the 2016 law and trade union workers have a freedom to form a union or employee association of their own choice, and there is no discrimination of race, sex, color, creed, political, religion, nationality, opinion, social origin, or health status. Employees also free whether to join or withdraw from a union. To form a trade union in Cambodia, at least 10 members are required. Trade unions in Cambodia are not allowing the employee to interfere a trade union affair and support trade unions that is under employer organization. In Cambodia, Cambodian workers are not bound or forced under any agreement to become part of the union members. Also, trade unions in Cambodia, a professional organization, has the right to draw up their own statutes and administrative regulation as long as they are not violated laws and public orders in Cambodia. And in Cambodia, there are freely to elect representative and formulate a work program. And the law has prohibits an organization that includes employers and workers work together in a trade unions. In addition, in Cambodia, there is a concept called the most representative unions, means that only one union that holds majority voice will act as a representative for all workers in workplace. However, for a minority union, they have no right to bargain, but there is a forum that allowing those minority unions to share their views with most representative unions. To protect the right of minority, representative union must bear with an obligation to fairly represent all workers no matter what their membership in union. So next is about the collective bargaining. The purpose of collective bargaining is to provide a better benefit to the workers than those provided in the law. And usually the typical issue of the bargaining agenda is about working time, wages, training, safety, workplace condition, and the objective of negotiation is to achieve the collective agreement. So the duration of a collective bargaining in Cambodia signed for a definite time are not exceed for 3 years, and collective bargaining indefinite term may be cancelled by giving cancellation notice of 1 year. There are three ways of determining legitimate bargaining and the obligation toward the most representative union, joint union, and multiple union. Prakas is the regulation issued by the minister or by the governor of the National Bank of Cambodia concerning banking or financial issue. First is the most representative union and obligation to bargain. According to the clause 9 and 10 of the Prakas 305/01, it's clearly defined that employer must bargain with any union that gets majority support from workers in the workplace. And this obligation falls in terms and conditions of employment which more clearly defined in the labor law. However, under the current Prakas, the minority has more opportunity in the bargaining process and is more protected where the Prakas allows minority to join in drafting collective bargaining if the majority allows to do so. So second is about joint unions and their obligation to bargain means that in case if there is no representative union exists in the workplace, two or more unions can form together to find majority support. And if they fulfill their requirements, this joint will become sole bargaining representative. Lastly is multiple bargaining means that employers support the responsibility to bargain in a good faith with all unions, then employer will obligate to bargain with all legitimate unions. So last is the right to strike in Cambodia. According to the labor law, defined that stoppage of work by the group of workers that take place within an enterprise or establishment with the objective to obtaining the satisfaction for their demand from the employee because the condition of their return to work. In Cambodia, only a peaceful strike is allowed and can be accepted after all the procedure of dispute resolution, that is negotiation, conciliation, and arbitration are failed. So before the strike, members of the union must approve the strike by secret ballot and inform the employees and the Ministry of Labor at least 7 days before strike. Strikers are not allowed forcing other members to participate in strike, and they have the right to go back to work without any punishment once the strike over. Strikers also are not allowed to treat the non-strikers, and the employers or are not required paying the workers on strike. According to the Cambodian law, minimum service must be maintained when the strike action. Besides that, labor law also requires the employers are not allowed to punish the striking and forbid to find a replacement of workers. And in Cambodia, the strike is illegal if it's not inharmonious and comply with the provision of labor law, and if the strike start in order to force employee to revise CBA or arbitral award which is still considered as force. So next is in Cambodia, the employers have the right to lock up the workers. However, this right is subject to the rules and restrictions as the right to strike. If the employers are found guilty from conduct illegal lockout, the employers are required to pay their salaries during the lockout along with the penalties to the employees. The employee will have the right to reprimand the employees for stopping participate in a lawful strike from doing threats against workers who have participated in a lawful strike. Failure to adhere with the reprimand or subject to a transitional fine, while not exceeding 5,000 real. In Malaysia ringgit, it is RM 5,264 ringgit.
Hi, my name is Nadejun Mididin with number matrix 61694. Today, I would like to present about current system laws and regulations of Cambodia. First of all, I am going to talk about payment of wages. The payment of wages in Cambodia is accordance with the 1997 Labor Code, in which the salaries must be at least equal to minimum wages. Minimum wage rate is determined by the Ministry of Labor and Vocational in negotiation with the Labor Advisory Committee by order of Malaysia. However, minimum wage may vary by the region and depends on the economic conditions and cost of living. Second, employment of women of Cambodia. An earlier Convention 103 from 1952, in which 12 weeks of maternity leave, 6 weeks after birth. However, a later Convention number 183 from year 2000 requires that maternity leave be at least 14 weeks, of which a period 6 weeks compulsory leave should be after childbirth. During pregnancy and maternity leave, an employee must have a medical and midwife treatment with no additional cost. Third, working hours and leave. Employees are permitted to work a maximum of 8 hours per day and maximum 48 hours per week. Days off is in which employees are entitled to a minimum of 1 day off per week. Employees entitled to up to 6 months sick leave with a valid doctor's certificate. Their annual leave entitled to 1.5 days of annual leave per month of their work. Lastly, I am going to talk about the termination benefits of Cambodia. There are two types of labor contracts, which are fixed duration and non-fixed duration at Cambodia. In fixed duration, the employees have signed for the specifically period of contracts, and non-fixed duration, in which the contract is open-ended, in which have a start date but does not have the end date. For fixed duration, there are three reasons for which our employer can dismiss an employee and not trigger the legal severance allowance. First reason, mutual agreement. Second, act of God, in which it not including the receivership, bankruptcy, and dissolution of the employer. Third, serious misconduct on the part of employee. If any of these reasons apply, then the termination can occur without any obligations accruing to the employer. For non-fixed duration contracts, the notice for non-fixed duration contracts for non-fixed duration contracts, the notice varies depending on how long an employee has worked for an employer. If the employee has worked for less than 6 months, the employer must provide a 7-day notice. If an employee has been employed from 6 months to 2 years, the employer must have provide a 15-day notice. From 2 to 5 years, 1 month notice. From 5 to 10 years, notice 2 months, and if more than 10 years, then a 3-month notice. In the period of notice, an employer will also pay a compensation to the employee. Allowance. First reason, mutual agreement. Second, act of God, in which it not including the receivership, bankruptcy, and dissolution of the employer. Third, serious misconduct on the part of employee. If any of these reasons apply, then the termination can occur without any obligations accruing to the employer. Unfixed duration contracts, the notice varies depending on how long an employee has worked for an employer. If the employee has worked for less than 6 months, the employer must provide a 7-day notice. If an employee has been employed from 6 months to 2 years, the employer must have provide a 15-day notice. From 2 to 5 years, 1 month notice. From 5 to 10 years, notice 2 months, and if more than 10 years, then a 3-month notice. In the period of notice, an employer will also pay a compensation to the employee.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Najmi. Today I will talk about Cambodia policy. Let's move on.
Employment of domestic worker and foreign worker. Based on National Law 1997 state domestic workers are not covered by law in the Cambodian. Except Cambodian will cover in two things, which is forced labor and minimum age of employment. Forced labor is absolutely forbidden by government in Cambodian will be protected from the force of labor by Cambodian government. Minimum age of employment for the Cambodian. It was divided into two types of category. First, Cambodian can work full-time work in non-hazard sector, which age of employment is 50 years old. Children were allowed to work lightly work with age 12 until 5 years old without affected their academy in school. However, under age 18 years old cannot perform any form of work that is considered hazard. Employment of foreign workers. Foreign must have a legal documentation to enter the Cambodian based on National Law of Law 1997. To work in the Cambodia, foreigner must obtain E-class visa, work permit and employment card with application at the Minister of Labour and Vocational Training. But before the foreigner want to apply the E-class visa, work permit and employment, they must follow few conditions to make application. The condition is foreigner must have a job offer from the employer who is compliant with relevant regulation regarding the employment of foreign national in Cambodia. Also, foreign must have entered Cambodia legally, possess an original passport with at least 6 months validity, also must have the right to reside in Cambodia and have a practical qualification for the relevant job. Also have no communicable disease. Sector of employment and the employment pattern in Cambodia. The chart show the increase of number of employment in the industry sector and service sector with 26.34% and 50.62% in 2019, an increase into 38.7% and 29% in 2000, while the decline in agriculture sector from 58.04% in 2009 to 32.3% in 2019. This show most of Cambodian more focus on employment in industry and the service sector. Government agency handling of domestic worker and foreign worker. First, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation (MOFA) responsible to manage outgoing migrants in cooperation with Minister of Labour and Vocational Training. Minister of Labour and Vocational Training responsible to establish norm, criteria and procedure for recruitment, education and training of workers. Also responsible for licensing recruitment agency, receive application from prospective overseas worker, ensure that candidates for any overseas worker are at least 18 years old, issue immigrant worker card and send and manage worker overseas. The Association of Cambodia Recruitment Agency (ACRA) is organization registered under the Minister of Labour and Vocational Training. The main objective is to harmonize Cambodian migration by coordinating with stakeholders such as government, private company, trade union, and international agency and NGO to promote safe immigrant. Also responsible for coordinating and organizing training courses.
Any foreigner worker who wants to work in Cambodia must have legal labor card and labor book that issued by the Ministry of Labor, and they must enter the Cambodia legally and hold a valid passport. Work permit is an official approval by the labor authorities that allow foreign nationals to work in Cambodia. This application for this permit must be made at the Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training between 1 January and 30 March of each year. According to the Cambodia Labour Law, Article 261, 264, and 265, All foreigners who plan to work in Cambodia must obtain a valid E-class that issued by the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training. This visa can be extended for a period of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and a maximum a year at a time. To extend the E-class visa, foreigner must have a passport with at least 6 months validity, a blank page in the passport, one passport size, and renewal fee in US dollar. For the retirement age in Cambodia, actually there is no general provision on retirement age. But on November 2019, Cambodia's Ministry of Civil Service has increased the retirement age of civil servants to the 60 years old. In Cambodia, the minimum age for employment is 15 years as set out in the labor law. Minors under 18 years cannot sign an employment contract without the consent of their parents. Minor aged 12 to 15 years may be hired to do like work provided the work is not hazardous to their health or mental and physical development and does not affect their attendance at school or training programs. The Cambodia labor law also prohibits children younger than age 18 from hazardous work, such as working on the ground like lifting, carrying, or moving heavy loads. The Cambodia have 4 policies related to the social security laws, which is National Social Security Fund is an institution of public administration with the mission of providing public social service. The NSSF is technically under the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training and financially under the Ministry of Economic and Finance. Secondly is Occupational Risk Scheme, whereas this scheme is responsible for employment injuries and occupational disease. The benefits under the occupational risk schemes include the medical care, a daily allowance, and a pension for disability, funeral benefits, and survivor pensions. Next is healthcare scheme. The benefits under these schemes consist of healthcare, medical care, and daily allowance during a worker absence from work due to treatments or other non-occupational accidents, and maternity leave. Lastly is pregnancy and maternity leave policy. Under the labor law, a female worker is entitled to 90 days of maternity leave. Phnom Penh Special Economic Zone, Mr. Hansen said that female workers will now receive 120% of the minimum wage from the 3 months of maternity leave. Previously, maternity leave workers were only receiving 50% of their wages.
As a conclusion, there were several similarities between Cambodia and Malaysia. Firstly, Malaysia is also a Southeast Asia country and our government structure is also the federal constitutional monarchy, consists of 13 states and 3 federal territories. Our country's capital city is Kuala Lumpur, while Putrajaya is the federal administrative center of Malaysian capital. And our official language is Bahasa Malaysia. Thus, our official document will be published in Bahasa Malaysia, whereas Islam is our official religion. In Malaysia, Employment Act 1955 is a main reference to manage Malaysian industrial relations system, while Cambodia is using Cambodian Labour and Employment Law 1997. According to the law, the working hour in Malaysia and Cambodia are the same, where the employees are allowed to have at least 1 day of rest per week and their maximum working hour is 8 hours per day or 48 hours a week. However, in Malaysia, the minimum wages are marginally higher than Cambodia as the cost of human capital is 102,000 ringgit monthly in the major towns such as Johor Bahru, Penang, North Kuching, and Miri. The human capital cost in Cambodia will be lower compared with Malaysia, as their minimum wages was set as 190 US dollar, or converted in ringgit Malaysia is 810 ringgit in 2020. In contrast, the protection regarding to women employees and young labor in Malaysia are more comprehensive compared by Cambodia. In Malaysia, the women are prohibited to work at night. No female should be employed in any underground working and any job that are restricted by women in ministry. But in Cambodia, employment law only stated the employee must give the break time for the young labor and women labor. For the maternity protection, the pregnant mother are allowed to get 60 days of maternity leave with full pay, and the husband may allow to get at least 7 days of paternity leave in government sector depend on the state. While some private sectors provide 3 days of paternity leave and some multinational company, male employees will get up to 14 days paternity leave. While in Cambodia, pregnant women are entitled 90 days of maternity leave with half pay. However, there were no specific paternity leave found in the labor law, but the workers may request for 7 days special leave for personal reason. Then, as a foreign worker to obtain job legally in this country, working permits are both required in Malaysia and Cambodia. In Malaysia, employment pass has 3 types to choose. Firstly is the employment pass. This pass issued to employees with specific skills generally in technical or managerial jobs, and the minimum period is usually 2 years. Temporary employment pass issue for the employment for less than 2 years with monthly salary less than 5,000 ringgit. And lastly is professional visit pass that issues to foreign nationals who remain employed by the company in the home country but are required by a Malaysian company to provide certain services for a period up to 6 months. For employment in Cambodia, according to the labor law, the employers are required to apply the working permit and employment card for the foreign employees, and the E-Class visa allows foreigners to stay in Cambodia for 30 days for business and work purpose. It can be renewed unlimited time and extendable for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. Lastly is the protection on children and young labor. Both laws in Malaysia and Cambodia are similar. A child may only allowed to be employed in light work that's suitable to his capacity in his family's undertaking. They are not allowed to work between 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. and permitted a rest of 30 minutes after every 3 consecutive hours working. In addition, young females are also not allowed to work in hotel, bar, restaurant, or club unless the organization is under control by her parents as well.